Once again, my name is Graham Lawler, and I'm the founder of Ultralight Startups. Can you close that door right behind you? Thank you. And we're here today to talk about Facebook for web apps. This is a topic that was introduced to me not long ago by one of our panelists, Dennis, when he's based in Denver, and he came by my office at the NYU Poly Incubator, and he asked for a place to hang out for the afternoon, and during the course of that afternoon pointed me to many, many things related to Facebook that I had never seen before, and basically got me thinking about how Facebook could be used for business, and I think that there are many, many ways that we'll hear about today. The particular topic here is Facebook for web apps. So I think people traditionally think of Facebook as a destination site. In order to interact with Facebook, you go to facebook.com and interact with it there. But clearly there's a lot more ways to interact with Facebook that are not on facebook.com, and that's the gist of it. So if you own a website and you want to use Facebook to generate traffic, to generate virality, to generate engagement in some way, there's lots of ways you can do that, and that's what we're here to talk about today. So the panel that we have, we're going to start with Greg. Greg, I would say, is my social media guru personally. He spoke. He actually moderated our panel on Twitter, our first and only Twitter panel about a year ago, and did a fantastic job on that. And I know he's one of the few people that's actually making money with Twitter-related products as opposed to Twitter consulting, or has a Twitter product that's not making money. So I think that he's got a lot of insights to share there, and recently launched a couple of products that have to do with Facebook and use Facebook's APIs. So I had to get him out here for that. So welcome, Greg. Matt is flown in from Palo Alto, California. Thank you very much for joining us. All the fans of Palo Alto out there, is a developer and architect with Facebook, and he is our Facebook rep, so he'll be talking the insider's view. Ian was introduced to me by Greg. He's got lots of different products. His company, Deep Focus, that he's done very interesting things and very innovative things with Facebook and the Facebook APIs, many of which he'll talk about as well. And Dennis has done lots of things. This is also a second-time panelist at Ultralight, which is a very esteemed role to have. He's also spoken on SEO earlier this spring, and introduced me to many of the topics that we're going to be talking about today. So thanks very much, Dennis. So with that, I thought I would start with this particular graph. And others like it have been sort of floating around on the internet lately. And what this shows is that Facebook's traffic, and I guess there's various measures of usage and traffic, is projected to surpass that of Google sometime in the next couple of years. There's variations of this. This one happens to be unique visitors, but if you look at page views or time spent on site, they kind of all say the same thing, that if Facebook already isn't, it's soon going to be the most trafficked site in the world. So I'm sure many people here spend hours on it. I think I read a stat lately that 40% of high school age girls check Facebook before they get out of bed in the morning. So it is a cultural phenomenon that is hard to really match in history. 500 million users. Every time you look at that stat, it seems like they've added another 50 million. Facebook would be the third most populous country in the world if it was a country, behind China and India. 1 million developers working on Facebook platform, 550,000 applications, 1 million websites integrated with the Facebook platform, and 150 million users on external websites. I believe the valuation, Facebook is not a publicly traded company, but is traded on second markets, if not other places, and its implied valuation there is $34 billion. Maybe we'll see an IPO sometime in the near future, which will make all the Facebook staff very happy. So I thought I would start with some concepts here, two kind of fundamental concepts we're going to we're going to build on this. So the feed and the social graph. Greg, do you want to talk about what the feed is and why it's important?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So we find with everything that we've done so far, even back with Twitter, and now Facebook shares these same properties, it's that, kind of the first thing, before you get out of bed, the thing that you're checking is the feed and seeing what everyone's saying. And the exciting opportunity for businesses right now, and with all the applications we build, is to create some kind of action that will end up in the feed from users, and that makes it much more viral.
Dennis, I know, because you shared with me when we spoke last, some strategies. What are the types of things that the Facebook feed shows, and how can you as an application developer get your news to show up in somebody's feed rather than everything else that might possibly be showing up in a feed?
So for those people who think about how to rank inside Google, ranking inside Facebook is very different because it's based on relevancy and whether you're tied to various objects, right? There's all these various things that are happening that Facebook has to decide, is it something that you would be interested in seeing? So I have 2,300 friends. I'm not going to see everything that's going on in my top news, even if I were able to see all these various items. So Facebook has to decide which of the things, based on who's a good friend of mine, is this a topic I'm interested in? Are other friends of mine also interested in this? Is it an interesting thing based on its post quality score, or what % of people are clicking on it, looking at some measure of engagement? And all these various factors go into their version of PageRank, EdgeRank, which is looking at particular objects and how closely tied it is with you. So if you've got a lot of engagement going on your page or on your site, that will then send a signal to Facebook saying, this is good stuff. And Alex Schultz, who runs online marketing for Facebook, he calls it interestingness squared and boringness squared. Because if something's viral and it's hot, Facebook, they're going to say, wow, I think that a lot more people are going to see this and it's going to spread. But if no one's interacting on it, if you're just spamming your customers with the same thing over and over again and you're using it as a promotional vehicle, that's just going to get killed, because then you're not going to get that secondary effect, right, of all the friends of friends that are able to see things. Matt wants to add to it?
Matt, do you have any insights?
I honestly think Dennis really hit it on the head. Generally, it's all about social context. It's not about what keywords you use and their status updates or things that are being posted back to the profile. So I think you hit it on that.
Do you have any sense of, like, in my feed, if I have 500 friends, how many possible news items might show up in the feed, and then how many actually do? Like, what percentage of the candidate news actually shows up in my feed?
So just to clarify, so in terms of the news feed, there's a toggle, right? There's top news and what the other one's called? Most recent, right? I should know that. So there's a toggle there. Most recent is literally just a chronological view of all the status updates and all the things your friends are sharing. Top news is the algorithmic view that we're talking about here. In terms of top news, everything can show up ultimately because the user can scroll down and scroll through all the latest items, and it's broken down by time decay, so you could get through all the status updates and things your friends are sharing. But generally, it really depends on the amount of content that's coming in, and that's what it highly depends on. So if you have 500 friends, we try to vary it depending on how much content is coming in, and float things to the top. So it's ultimately interesting if you come back 2 times a day, or if you come back 20 times a day. We try to keep the feed as interesting as possible to you.
Well,
it's a tough. I know it's a big question, but I think it's a tough thing to answer.
What types of things might show up in a feed, in my feed, let's say?
Yeah, so I think Dennis hit on the head. It's basically around social context. We don't have a straightforward algorithm. We could share it, even if we did, we probably wouldn't share it publicly. But generally, it's things like we know, for example, how close you are to people, and it's based on a variety of things like how many posts have you liked of theirs, how many times have you commented on their things, and we have this correlation between people. So when you're when you're looking at your feed, that's basically how we calculate how high it should be in the feeds. And also, are you tagged in photos? Basically, there's a black box of this information that just allows you, or allows us to correlate how close you are to certain friends. And that's what increases the likelihood or decreases it of seeing information in the news feeds.
And so why, as an application owner, either your Facebook page owner or you're an external site, why is it important that my news shows up in somebody's feed as opposed to gets buried and not shows up?
So I don't know if anyone wants to. Do you want to take it or?
Well, it's really a matter of getting your news to be seen, and then there are two ways to end up in the feed. One is that someone, either they friend you, more likely if you're a business, you're going to have a Facebook page, or if you're an app, you're going to have kind of an equivalent to a Facebook page. Then you can publish stories, and that has a chance of coming in, it could be seen for sure in the most recent feed, but in the more curated feed, you're kind of battling for it. But then the other layer to getting into the feed is kind of how do you enable your users or your customers to create news about you. And to me, that's just as powerful, and probably the more powerful thing if you're looking to engage new users rather than just maintain relationships with your existing users. So there, the very simplest way is just to put on the like button. But that's, I guess, later on we'll talk more about that. But that it's not as powerful as actually having interesting content or action for users to take that'll post to the feed, and then because the user's posting it, it goes out to their friends.
Yeah, there are two ways, coming at it from an agency perspective and dealing with brands. There are two ways that we look at it. One way is getting into the newsfeed through applications. Third-party applications, not the native Facebook applications, which publish to the newsfeed with permission, once you get granted permission. And those are fine. They get turned off sometimes if they're too frequent by the user, I should say. You don't always need to see you got a black sheep in Farmville. More on that later. But the other way to do it is through the inherent, or the innate Facebook apps, which are like notes, photos, status updates, events, things like that. And from a marketing perspective, the reason why those are Facebook proprietary apps are because those are the most useful things. Those are the things that you use every day and are probably the most relevant to you. So we while we do use third-party apps, and whether they're apps that we build to get certain things done on Facebook, or go outside of Facebook to get them done, or become a part of ones that already exist, we're also doing initiatives that get people to use the native Facebook apps a certain way. Like we did this campaign to launch Mad Men last year called Mad Men Yourself. And if any of you guys have seen that, it allows you to basically customize either your Twitter icon or your Facebook photo to look like an ad from the early 60s. Millions of people do this. But the great thing was that every time you exported a photo or a new likeness of yourself, a new avatar, and you changed your Facebook photo, it goes right into your newsfeed. Ian just updated his Facebook photo, right? And so when people see that, I want to know what that is, as opposed to kind of maybe letting it be a blip on the radar, which is Ian just liked some phrase, So this was a more relevant thing to people when you change your photo. It's a very personal experience, and to your closest circle, those personal experiences are more meaningful.
Go ahead.
So Graham asked the question, why would you want to do this offsite instead of on Facebook? If you're an existing brand and you're already well known and you already have a lot of traffic, you've got a lot of users, you have people who are already engaged and are aware of who you are, it's very easy to get them down the engagement curve, to get them to like you, to get them to comment, to put in these various apps, to run contests. We've run a number of contests for retail brands, fast food franchises, this kind of thing, and it absolutely kills our post quality score, as in awesome post quality score, right? If you look at your Facebook Insights, they've now released where your likes are coming from and how many people are clicking like, or they're commenting, or taking other kinds of actions. And what we've noticed, if you're an existing brand and you've already got a ton of traffic on your website, that's a great way to go viral. It's much harder to start from a brand new page and try to build up a community there than it is to start with the audience that already knows who you are. And Facebook has released so many of these widgets, like the like boxes, and recommendations, there's just no reason not to do it because it doesn't cost you anything. But of course, are there some Facebook sales reps in the room? They'll want to ask you to advertise as well, and that works well too. But the first thing you should do is put those engagement objects on your site. Because it helps you show up in the feed, right? My friend liked this, so-and-so said watch this movie, all those kinds of things. It just really, really helps you rank. I think it's almost to the point where, I don't even think Matt could talk about it if he could, but what we've noticed, just anecdotally, is that when you do that, it gives you this multiple in terms of how many people are going to see what's going on your page and also within the feed. So if you've got a page, for example, and it's got more than 5,000 fans, they're going to show you the insights in terms of what percent of people are interacting, and we'll often see 2 or 3%. So maybe 10,000 people saw this particular status update, and we'll see 2 or 3% interact. But then, when we can get more of that engagement off-site, we can increase that number, and it just creates a huge viral factor when you can tie in the off-site portion.
So let's talk about some innovative uses of the Facebook platform, particularly external websites that have integrated with Facebook and the Graph API and social plugins. So I asked you guys each to think of your favorite site that's really done an interesting job and innovative job at that. You want to start, Craig?
Sure. I think one of the most compelling ones, especially looking at a company that did this and came from nothing. There are examples like Huffington Post where they were already big and they used this to up it. But if you look at a site like FormSpring, it was a really compelling case where they only launched the site in January. I think now it's one of the...
.me. Sorry, .me.
It's formspring.me, yeah. maybe they're so successful that their server went down already. So when the site's up, or when you have an internet connection, you can go on this site. Basically what allows people to do is solicit questions for themselves from all their contacts, all their friends and followers, either with their name or anonymously. So in a way, it's like they built this tool so you can just solicit questions from people you know. And you could have always built a tool that would solicit questions, but you would have never had a way to get it out in one click to everybody that you know. So this is an example of one of these ideas that was only possible in the last, really year or so since Facebook opened up. And because of it, companies like FormSpring and, if you look at the gaming companies, they're just growing faster than any other company has ever grown, including Facebook, because when Facebook launched, Facebook didn't exist to be viral on. But now that these guys can be viral on Facebook, they can grow even faster than Facebook did.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, the examples that come to top of mind probably take too much work to pull up on the browser. But two that come to mind are, one is Spotify, and it's a music startup out of Sweden. And basically what they do is it's almost like a legal version of Napster where you can listen to any song, right? And inherently, music is a pretty social experience. When you hear about a new band, you probably tell your friends. So what Spotify has done is they integrated Facebook, so it actually pulls up your friends and the right rail of their desktop client. So when you're listening to music, you actually just drag and drop musical artists, and then it'll post back to their profile on Facebook, and it'll also share to them on Spotify. And you can click through your friends, and you can see the playlists they've created. And yeah, I think it's a really solid integration. Another one is, actually I have two in the e-commerce space. So at F8 we launched with Levi's.com, and they did something really innovative where they put the like button on all clothing items, and they're doing really interesting things. You can actually go to Levi's.com.
The internet doesn't seem to be working for me right now.
So the idea is you like things, you can see what your friends are liking on the site, what kind of jeans do my friends wear, that type of thing. The most popular items. The same company is doing interesting things with 1-800-Flowers and a couple other companies where they'll actually pull in, for example, your friends' birthdays, and they'll automatically make recommendations you should buy your friends based off their Facebook information, what they've liked around the internet. So, for example, if my friend has liked this doesn't apply too well, but say for example, my friends liked Avatar on IMDb, and they can surface. Say there's a movie site that was selling DVDs. They can surface something like Aliens that my friend might be interested in. So it kind of creates this really nice environment where I get to see my friends' upcoming birthdays, but typically I have no idea what to buy them, and they're making automatic suggestions that are probably pretty head-on with what my friends are interested in. So those are the two main ones. That's it.
Fantastic. Okay, Ian?
Yeah, along those lines. I mean, there's just the other day, maybe yesterday or the day before, Urban Outfitters launched a similar implementation of Open Graph where you can like the merch and you can resort it based upon what your friends like. And Levi's does this too. They actually have a Facebook Friends store. So you can literally just click a link in a tab that just shows you what your friends are buying, or not really buying, actually just liking. So it doesn't actually look at even purchase history. It looks at liking history, which is a heck of a lot more potentially, I guess, relevant to somebody, because just because you don't buy something doesn't mean you don't like it. For about 5 minutes last night, Apple implemented Facebook on Ping in iTunes. That was cool when it was there for 5 minutes. And there you could, when you install iTunes, you could just simply, seek out your friends that were on Facebook and, see who they liked, or see their music purchase, in this case, history. And there were some likes in there too, but that was there for 5 minutes. Then the other thing is just really the New York Times. So one of the things as big publishers are implementing Open Graph stuff, what they're finding is that the amount of time that's spent on the site increases significantly. So Martin Eisenholtz, who runs New York Times Digital, he has said very publicly that in some cases the value of visits to the New York Times for people that are logged in using Facebook have jumped over two times, which is for the New York Times significant, because they sell advertising, a lot of advertising, and the more inexpensive advertising. So the more time that people are spending on the site, the more articles they're reading, and the more people come to the New York Times, the better. And the good thing about New York Times is that they're so authoritative that people liking stories on the New York Times because it makes them look smarter. It's like putting books on your bookshelf that you've never read before, like Moby Dick. It's Herman Melville.
Is New York Times doing anything particularly smart, or are they just using the social plugins?
Actually, right along very basic integration. They're doing some really cool things on their own side, like when you scroll down to a story, they start recommending another story based upon the stories that you've read. But I think it's going to get a lot more integrated with the platform. I don't know, Matt, if you know anything about that more than I do.
No, I think you hit it on the head. They're doing some really interesting things about surfacing what your friends are recommending on their site. And generally, when you land on an article, say you come from a search engine, they also show that information. And also what's popular based on people from Facebook that are visiting the site and recommending articles. So I think it's pretty awesome.
We're actually working on an app now so that it'll just auto-tweet your New York Times articles, so you don't even have to read it to look smart.
It's great. It's like auto-retweeting jokes to make you sound funnier.
That's right. You guys are featuring it, right?
Dennis, what's your favorite site other than ones you've built yourself?
So I'm going to give you a big brand example, and then I'm going to give you one that applies more to people in this room who don't have the huge video budgets and big brands and that kind of thing. So WebTrends is a client that we work with. They do web analytics. Of course, you can run ads. But what we've done is we'll target marketing managers in ads who are at Ford, for example, and they'll come to webtrends.com to a landing page that is scored just for them with their Facebook score, with their SEO metrics, their page rank, backlinks, all these sorts of metrics. And we use Facebook Connect to be able to pull all this data in so that we can get all of their relevant stats and generate a personalized report, which then, if they want more information, they can put in their email and be contacted by sales, download a free report. But we find that that's been incredibly effective in terms of lead gen, because using Facebook Connect, we can instantly personalize. It's much more powerful than putting a like box or allowing people to comment and these other sorts of bits, right? Because think about all the things that you can request through Facebook Connect. You can get their email address, you can post to their wall, you can, whatever, just like what the different games do, but you can do that on your site, and it's actually very easy to implement. Now, in terms of a small biz example that's good for ultralight startups where you don't have a lot of money, a friend of mine, he's a professional daddy blogger at almightydad.com. Now, check this out. You've probably seen when people will put the like box and they'll allow people to comment, how easy it is to allow people to comment so they don't have to register, that sort of thing. That's all true. But what we've noticed is that when there's more interaction that's occurring, this is especially true in the last 3 months, when people are commenting, Google, because of what they've done with caffeine and real-time indexing, when they notice that a page has changed and there's more content, that sends a signal saying this is fresh, this is interesting, and it'll start to push you up in the search results. So some of his posts there get 300, 400, 500 comments, largely because we're using Facebook Connect. And it doesn't require any special magic to be able to put the box there. It's just there responding to people's comments. I don't care what kind of site you have. It could be discussing, the best parking places in New York City. If you're interacting with people, and then it's pushing to the feed, and then all the friends of those people are coming in, and that's causing more interaction to occur on the page. I don't mean the Facebook page, on your website. That's going to bump you right up to the top in Google, especially if you've got media, right? Because if you do search engine optimization, you have QDF, Query Deserves Freshness, which is about recency, so that news and things like that pop up. And then QDD, Query Deserves Diversity. So when you have a variety of media, so things like photos and videos, just go straight to the top in Google search because it's so easy to rank for those items. And then next to, close your ears, next to the icons, the widgets that you implement, if you can put some text around there that's before or after, not even like alt tags, then that gives a signal to the search engines what that item is about. So it'll just bump you straight up to the top in Google search.
So putting text, so you're on your website, you have a like button, and you're putting text above and below it?
Well, it depends on what the interaction is. We've been testing with that.
Descriptive text? Is it descriptive of what?
Yeah. So just think about it. How does Google tell what an image or a video is about? Certainly there's facial recognition technology, all these kinds of things that do that, but the best way is they're looking contextually. What are the words that are around an image about what it might be? If other people are linking to a picture and they're linking with the keywords New York City tacos, and all these people are, and then the words around that image are New York City tacos, Google can infer this is something that should rank for New York City tacos.
In the same way that they use AdSense to target ads.
It's a
for
different
that content
algorithm
too.
for AdSense, but similar concept.
Right.
I wanted to drop a quick note. So I just noticed the company behind Levi's integration, Social Amp, the engineer that worked on it is in the back of the room. So if you want to go heckle him and ask him all sorts of questions, he's back there. So swarm him after this. He's the genius behind it.
Thanks, Alex. Actually, Alex was the one that put me in touch with Matt in the first place and brought him out here, so you have Alex to thank for that as well. All right, so let's talk about the social graph. It seems to be a phrase that's been tied to Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg in particular. I don't know if he was the one that actually invented it or not. What is the social graph? Anybody want to answer that question? What's the concept of a social graph and why is it important? Greg, you want to take it?
Yeah, it's the social graph. It's basically everyone you know. It's kind of or everyone you know on the site. In terms of how it affects Facebook, it's kind of just a fancy word for all your friends on Facebook. And then the really compelling part of it is that it's now portable. So you log into Facebook, they know who your friends are. That determines your news feed. That determines what photos you see, who you can communicate with. But now if you go to any other site, like some of these examples, Yelp's another great example where you can go there, you can see what restaurants all your friends have been to, what restaurants your friends are reviewing. And kind of now that it's out there, it almost seems absurd going through what we've all been used to going through, which is you get to a new social network to do one specific thing, and then you have to rebuild all your friends. You have to rebuild your social graph and send out 100 annoying friend requests and get them back. And what it seems to be happening is going forward through Facebook, probably for the most part, to some degree too, through the Twitter social graph being portable, through the API, and also through LinkedIn to some degree, that you go to any new site for any reason, and it will know who your friends are because you can connect with the API or just through a plugin from Facebook or Twitter.
Yeah, I think the way that when Facebook throws around the Open Graph, and when they visualize it, when Mark puts like the big picture of it behind him on stage, it's all relationships, interpersonal relationships, but it's also broken down into nodes. So and the nodes are there to show proximity and relevance, which factors into the algorithm that Matt was talking about, which determines what gets displayed in your newsfeed. So all of this stuff is all about getting more relevant. So, and I'm an ad guy, so I constantly go back to the ad world. But so Google has AdSense, which wherever you are shows you ads that are relevant to you based upon the content on the page that you're seeing it adjacent to. I guess the promise of Facebook, and granted today this is only happening on Facebook.com, but once Facebook becomes Skynet and the ads are everywhere, it's inevitable. It'll be showing you things based upon your proximity to what your friends enjoy or like, and it's happening right there on Facebook right now, and it's showing you even what you like, but we also notice that your friend likes NASCAR too. So this might even be more relevant. So I think the social graph is, in the context of Facebook, is certainly also about not just the list or the address book, but also that proximity to relevance.
So you said nodes. What are the nodes in the social graph?
They're kind of like think about it like families, right? So you have like nuclear families, and families have neighbors, and neighbors have their extended families. And as you get further away from these little clusters, you still may have things in common with them, but
Right.
They're not the same things that hold you together. They're like
So-
little solar systems in
Like
the
a
same
person's
galaxy.
profile would be a type of a node in the social graph, right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the person would be there is a person at the center of that, and then there are people that are related to that person, and those people have relationships. And,
They're connected to and so
yeah.
on.
And
then-
if you look at it in the sense of number of connections or influence or however you want to look at it, those nodes can be bigger or smaller.
Great.
In terms of
so
how you
a
visualize
person is a node, a group is a node, a page is a node.
Well, and objects are a node too, and that's
Objects are
what
nodes.
the Open Graph is really about.
What are the edges?
relationships.
What are the
Those are
vertices?
how
so,
you're connected,
so what
yeah.
are some examples of types of vertices in the social graph? There's
So-
friend connections, likes.
Yeah, so I think the vertices or the edges of the graph are essentially just connections between those objects. And again, I think those objects are people, events, photos, anything on Facebook, and actually any object that is being created by developers now through the like button, because we treat basically anything that has a URL as a potential object in our system. So when a user likes something, that becomes an object in the graph. And all of the edges are essentially just connections between those. So for example, if I RSVP yes to an event, then that will be a connection between myself and the event. And then, if 15 of my friends also connect to the event, you can see 15 other edges that go to that event. So that's generally how we think about it. And I think as an overall, people are creating those connections. That's how this graph is being filled out. We kind of give them the tools, both Facebook and you as developers, to create those objects and those connections. But generally, it's powered by people.
So if you have a website, either your site itself or every single page on your site could be nodes in this graph, and everybody that likes one of your pages or likes your site itself is creating vertices in the social graph.
Yeah, so generally, I don't know if everyone saw F8 or saw the live stream or whatever, but the idea, I think the graph you're talking about that Mark displayed behind him showed himself in the middle, and then it was Yelp to one side and a bunch of his friends to the other side. And basically, Yelp had created a bunch of objects in the graph that were restaurants, and you could see connections between Mark's friends and restaurants, and also Mark and restaurants. So you get to see like very interesting overlaps, like being able to see that information of what your friends are also connected to is really the power behind the graph, and really what we're exposing on platform, and you can use on platform to do things like recommendations, show common interests your friends are sharing with you, that type of thing.
They're kind of like pivot points. If you've ever done data tables in like Excel, it's like pivot tables. So it's like you can choose to pivot around certain data, and sometimes you can pivot around people's relationships, but you could also pivot around people's tastes and likes, and connections to experiences. And I think that's
So
really just.
how does the social graph relate to the feed? How do those relate to each other?
So let me back up a step. I want to mention something. So in the world of the web, you have web pages that link to one another. And when they link to someone else, that's a vote in terms of increasing page rank and link juice that's being flowed. So it's pages that are voting for one another in the whole web. You know, when you think about the social graph, it's other objects. It's not just web pages. It's anything that's a noun. It's an event. It's a like. It's a person. It's, you know, some crazy slogan that people thought was funny. And when these objects are linking to one another, that creates what other people call friend rank, or some signal to Facebook saying, this is interesting to the feed, this is related to me because 5 of my friends like it, because other people who seem to like this kind of object also tend to like it. And one of the things that we did 3 years ago, I'm sure Alex and Matt would remember, when we first launched apps with an FQL call, you could grab not only all the information of the people who had installed your app, but all of the friends of friends.
What is FQL?
Facebook query language.
And
so it's just very simple SQL to be able to hit a database and say, give me their name, whether they're married, and their marital status, their age,
And
location.
so who would use Facebook query language and
If you're a developer and you built an app on Facebook, say one of the silly games, werewolves, ninjas, whatever it might be.
so your application can perform certain queries on the
Yeah.
social graph?
Any of the games out there are using that to grab user information so you can have a frictionless environment to be able to interact with your friends, so your friends don't have to input all their information. It's all right there to be used.
Okay.
Now,
Does anybody have questions about these two concepts right now, the feed and the social graph? Go ahead.
I wanted to ask about raising the post quality. Like, what gets factored into the quality of the actual post, and how do you raise it?
So,
You want to repeat the question?
if you want to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
What gets factored into the post quality? Tell me what a post quality is and what contributes to it.
Yeah, so as far as I know, we have no recognition of a post quality. Basically, the quality is determined by the users, right? Like, we have, everything boils down to social context. So it could be you posted a cow from Farmville to your wall, or you shared like an extremely interesting, intriguing, thought-provoking article from the New York Times. And we don't differentiate those. They're just two pieces of content to us. And generally how we know to surface those to you or not is based off of essentially how close you are to that friend, how many of your friends have liked that item, how many of your friends have commented on it, various gamut like that. So we don't have any concept of a post quality.
maybe Anna's...
But I'm talking about on insights, like when you're managing a business page, right? And it gives you the insights and it tells you, your post quality is
She's talking about the old insights, where there was what Facebook called a post quality score is not per post. It's for the page. It should be called a page quality score, and the definition is the last 7 days, what % of people have liked or commented or engaged in. You can think of it almost like a batting average out of 1,000. Although in weird cases, when you have a brand new page and their data is a little bit delayed, you can be over 1,000. And they tell you how many stars you have from 0 to 5 stars. But I think that's being deprecated with the new insights. But you can still go and see your old insights there. But go to facebook.com/insights.
Is that relevant, and does that change who sees the content?
Absolutely.
And so what do you do to improve that?
You get more engagement. So if you've got more than 5,000 fans and you're looking at a post or you're looking at a video you put up or whatever, try to get that above a couple %. If you suck, and it'll say something like 0.01%, that's just no good because people don't find it relevant. Actually, the simplest thing is just ask a question. One of the things we did for WWE, which is that they do wrestling, we launched a brand new site for WrestleMania a few months ago, and we went from nothing to 100,000 fans in 7 days. And the way we did it primarily was virally because of a really high post-quality score. And what did we do? At first we started off saying, and it was in Spanish, so my best friend's wife translated it, but we were saying, hey, let's welcome to Facebook, or who do you think's going to win WrestleMania, or these sorts of things. But we found that when you ask a direct question, we'll get a 4 to 6% interaction rate, because people will vote, and then they'll start to argue with one another, and then their friends will start to participate, and then pretty soon, even though you might have only 10,000 fans on that page, when you look at your insights, it'll say like 150,000 people saw it, and when you see a multiple of people seeing it versus how many fans you have, then you know you have that second-degree viral factor. It's not rocket science. You want to get people to participate, and oftentimes things where they're emotionally charged, where they're arguing, it's great in sports and entertainment, movie stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dean, question.
Why don't Facebook show you how many people are hiding your details from the
They
Why
should
why
hide.
doesn't Facebook show you how many of your friends are?
Analytics, why don't they tell you how many people are hiding your posts from their newsfeed?
You want to know who's ignoring you?
Hidden is now showing in Insights. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they show you
Yeah, for
unlikes, but they
pages.
show you how many are hidden as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
They do. Okay, sounds good. Right here.
There's a lot of blogs, a lot of books written about how to rank in Google search results. What recommendations do you have for further reading regarding Facebook ecosystem? You know, basically, the stuff you're talking about now. What blogs or things would you suggest people do for further reading?
What would you read to know more about Facebook and how to interact with it as an application developer, I guess?
There's a huge developers forum. That's in that question.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of resources, official and unofficial. I think official, you can do things like subscribe to the RSS feed on our developers blog. That's a big one. We always announce new things there. We have a bunch of fan pages. So we have, for example, a Facebook and media fan page. We have a Facebook platform fan page. And generally, when we see interesting things happening in the ecosystem, whether it be people using our platform in interesting ways or really great integrations, we'll highlight those on those fan pages. And I think unofficially, blogs like All Facebook, Inside Facebook, those are really, really good resources as well.
By the way, the Facebook developers blog, even if you're not a developer, is fascinating. And it's freaking great. And if you're even just a marketer, generally the stuff that's in there is pretty legible in layman's terms enough for you to follow along. It's also the place where a lot of the news does break first. So
Let's
it's a good read.
let's move on here for a second. We'll take a couple more questions in a moment. So, you just mentioned the Facebook platform? What is the Facebook platform, and how do you engage with that as an external site or brand?
Sorry, do you mean the fan page?
I mean, you use the phrase Facebook platform. I guess there's on-page stuff or on Canvas
Oh, okay.
and off Canvas. So,
Yeah.
what is the whole universe of what is the Facebook platform?
Yeah, so I think the Facebook platform is like you can integrate using Facebook, whether it be pulling in a user's friends, their likes, their gender, their current location, all that information, wherever basically there's an internet connection, right? Facebook platform can be integrated on mobile devices. It can be integrated on websites. It can be integrated on basically anything, photo kiosks, things like that. So Facebook platform, I think to break it down a little more, a step within web, there's on Facebook and there's off Facebook. On Facebook is generally Canvas, or referred to as Canvas. So you have games like Farmville, and you have utilities like Living Social and Causes and things like that. So that's Canvas. That's on Facebook. Off Facebook is basically everything else. We used to refer to it as Connect until we decided to end the brand shortly after F8. So now it's just referred to as Facebook platform off of Facebook.com, essentially.
Okay.
Right after Vitamin Water named a flavor after Facebook Connect.
That's true. I don't think they were happy about that.
So, if you're a site, if you're a startup, how do you know whether you should engage on Facebook.com or integrate your external site with Facebook, and what motivates that decision? Got ideas on that, Greg?
Well, so for us, we've decided to do both. Well, with our Twitter things, you can only do it off there. With Facebook, we decided to do it as a separate site. I think it depends what you're looking to do. If you're building something that can kind of only live within the Facebook world, then it might make sense to do an app. I'd be curious to get other thoughts on kind of even then if it now makes sense to still do an app versus do it on your own site. A lot of the things that are apps today, especially like the social games, started before that decision was viable. It's only been fairly recent that you could have as rich of experience on your own site rather than having to do it within Facebook. So for us, we saw, many products you come up with, they're usually also going to have a life in a world outside of Facebook. So one of our sites is Shoutworthy, that lets you send a shout out or a recommendation to anybody else, but you can also tweet out that action. You can find people through search. There are a number of ways to engage with the site, just like a site like Yelp for restaurants. So if you have an idea for an app that's going to be kind of multifaceted, even though Facebook's integral to it, you can do it and you should do it on your own site. if it's something that can only exist in the world of Facebook, then you actually have a decision to make.
Well, and there are times when you need to do an app. So, like for example, according to the T's and C's of Facebook now, I mean, you can't technically, again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but technically you can't do like contests and sweepstakes within a page without actually having it be administrated through an app, which is primarily a way of Facebook limiting their own liability. So not getting sued for any time you try to give away a DVD. And someone complains about it, it happens. So now you have to actually build an app and administer the contest or sweepstakes through the app. So that's a time when you've kind of been painted into a corner where you have to launch one. So,
Dennis, what do you advise your clients? Any reason why you would create a Facebook app as opposed to an external site integrated?
From a practical standpoint, you want to start from where you have traffic. If you're an existing brand, you can start from your page because that's where you're going to get the most interaction, the most bang for your buck. If you are a startup, then you might want to start with some advertising and then also run it to your site. I think that there's a perception, even though you can technically do things whether on or off Facebook, there's still a perception that if it's on Facebook, it's a game and it's not serious, even though there are things like causes and real world business apps. But if you're doing something that's real world, the perception still, and I know that you can do it on Facebook, but the perception is that you want to do it off the site at first to have more engagement, more control. You can go beyond 520 pixels, these sorts of bits.
Okay, let's take some questions. Vidar.
Question for Matt. So I'm working with a few retailers who love the whole idea of the open graph, and we're helping them basically
Very brief question.
turn hundreds of thousands of their SKUs into objects in the open graph system. Now they're concerned, okay, they're going to turn hundreds of thousands of pages into objects, and being that the open graph is somewhat fragile to like jacking, they're afraid that you might change the way the portal works one day, and suddenly they find themselves,
So the question is, what if
20
Facebook
million
changes your
fans
protocol?
short.
What if Facebook changes your protocol? Is that the question?
Yes, particularly with the open graph being so new and it's being implemented like
Okay.
wildfire.
Any insights on that?
So, I mean, generally, if you're a legitimate site using the Open Graph Protocol and the like button, you will not be affected by changes we make against like jacking. I can guarantee that.
The heads up are pretty good. I mean, generally, even with like things like page width,
Yeah.
they've been.
Yeah.
If you're in the system, you get notified.
I mean, generally, from Open Graph perspective or Open Graph Protocol perspective, if we make a change, we're going to announce it well beforehand. We actually have, I think it's a 30-day breaking change policy where if we expect something we're changing on platform to break you, then we'll announce it 30 days in advance and give you plenty of time to migrate.
Okay. What is like jacking?
Of course. So like jacking, it's basically a derivative of the word clickjacking, right? So clickjacking is basically where someone has an element on a web page and they cover it up with an image or something else, and they do some technical hackery to basically, when the user clicks on that image, that very compelling image, whatever it may be, then it actually clicks below the image. So that's what like jacking is.
So you're getting people to like things that they didn't intend to like.
Yeah, that's the premise.
Okay. Alex.
I got a question for Matt. So recently, Y Combinator and Facebook's partnership. Can you explain a little more about that?
The partnership between Y Combinator and Facebook. What's that about?
Oh yeah, so I think this is a pretty small announcement. It didn't get covered too much, but recently we had a Dev Garage in Palo Alto and invited a bunch of startups, just like this audience out there, and talked about what we felt was the future of the web and social and where it's going. And as part of that Dev Garage, we announced that we're working with Y Combinator in their next round. So what they're going to be doing is putting up requests for startups on their site, and the next round is going to be solely focused on social, and specifically we're going to be working on Y Combinator companies very closely. We're going to have hack sessions with them. They're going to get access to our engineers, including me, and also special programs, things like credits and instant personalization. So generally working very closely with them, and what we think, generally we think startups are the industry disruptors, as we've seen, for example, in gaming. And that's what we want to see from this batch of Y Combinator startups.
So, given that any site can integrate with Facebook, how do you say this is a Facebook-related Y Combinator project or non-Facebook related?
I'm not sure the details. I think generally they're going to open up the forum for anyone to sign up for, and basically, based off of your ideas and how you plan on implementing Facebook, it has to have Facebook in it, obviously. Then we'll go through a selection scenario and figure out, a dozen different companies that we want to work very closely with.
Okay.
This is for the new round of Y Combinator.
Yeah. So the next round of Y Combinator startups, I think the form's online. If it's not, it should be in the next week or so. But yeah, the next round.
Okay, let's take a question. Sergey.
When are you going to have Dev Skyscraper in New York instead of Dev Garage?
When are you going to have it? So we have...
We have garages in New York. They just charge $300 a month.
Actually,
Subway.
let me repeat the question if you don't mind. So there's a developers forum called Facebook Developers Garage, and it meets, I understand, regularly in Palo Alto, not so regularly here in New York. And why is it bigger there?
Yeah, so I can attest to that. I actually used to work for a startup in New York for a couple years, working on a platform for a video game company here. And I think New York startups have typically been an interesting audience. The core was non-developers, that type of thing. But we actually had a dev garage last night that apparently everyone missed out on, unfortunately. And it was awesome. It was at Webster Hall. We had booze, we had loud music, and then we had a bunch of presentations, including me and a bunch of other people like Social Amp and people that are building on the platform. And it was a huge turnout. I think we had 400 RSVP, and we had a couple hundred people in attendance. So I think it's definitely turning around in New York. And in terms of, I think, why it's small, it's because one of the reasons is Facebook hasn't really had a presence out here, right? We have an office with, I don't know, like 40-odd salespeople, but we haven't had a presence beyond that. I feel like most people don't know we have an office at all out here. So, and this isn't a plug at all, but we are essentially hiring non-sales people out here, which includes a replacement for me, so I don't have to make all these long trips to the East Coast, and also some general partner managers to work with developers out here.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next item here, which is I got these kind of 3 steps from my discussion with you last week. If you have a website and you'd like to integrate it with Facebook, you said there's kind of 3 stages of that in terms of your effort and your engagement with the platform. So walk us through these.
Yeah, I'm actually interested. It sounds like Dennis has a bunch of experience, and I'm sure others do as well. I would be interested to hear if they could explain how they work and the benefit you see behind them and different things like that.
Okay.
And I can just play cleanup.
Okay, sounds good.
I thought we'd go with the official answer.
I mean, these are your 3 categories, but to start with, you can just use the like buttons, and why would I want to ever go beyond just using the social plugins that I can get, in 2 seconds from Facebook? Dennis, you want to answer that?
Social plugins we view as being light interaction, initial engagement. So the fact that someone likes something isn't really interacting. They're not sharing a lot of information. I guess they can comment, right, with that thing you change on a like box where you click like and then that little box pops up. But if you want to build a real application where people are grading themselves, they're shopping, they're building apps together, whatever it is that people that you're doing that's beyond just I'm going to like something, that's when you're going to want to tie into Facebook Connect or whatever you call it now, and then the Graph API, where you're going to grab all the other information about them to create a game-like experience. So if you look at, for example, what Bunchball is doing, they do what they call the gamification, and they do this for Fortune 500 companies like Comcast, right, where you can share your favorite shows and you can comment and you can rate, and there's leaderboards and how many minutes did you watch, and all this kind of stuff based on what your preferences are. That can't happen in a social plugin. That's deeper interaction. So if you think about the overall marketing funnel of awareness, interest, desire, action, when you get people all the way down to the end, the social plugins just aren't enough. The social plugins are very light interaction, but it's great initial engagement.
So the social plugins, for those of you who don't know, is basically taking a tiny JavaScript snippet, dropping it in the HTML of your website, and that will produce a like button, and somebody can like that, and it shows up potentially in people's feeds and your friends' feeds and things like that. Or the recommendation box. I know this is on Wall Street Journal as a site that I visit frequently. You can see here's what my friends have liked, or here's what the most liked stories on wallstreetjournal.com. All those things are basically trivial to implement. You can do that with no effort at all.
Yeah, I think generally, just going back to the topic we keep covering, how does my content get at the top of news feeds? I think the number one concept is just like making very interesting content that's engaging users, of course, making viral content, that type of thing. And then the second is just setting up a virtuous cycle in your website. So giving users the tools to share your content via the like button. So if they see a funny video on your site, they can like it right there. They don't have to copy and paste the URL and go back to Facebook, paste it in, and then share it with their friends. They can just click like, and that's it. And then the video is shared to their wall. And then I think, the virtuous cycle begins when my friend clicks that link, they come back to your site, they watch that funny video, they see the like button with my friends' faces that have also liked this, which is another key feature of the like button. It automatically creates this really engaging experience for users because it can display who among your friends have also liked that piece of content without the user authenticating. Technical details, basically it's served up in an iframe. That's why we can do that. And also, like you're saying on the Wall Street Journal, having a recent activity plugin. So when my friend lands on the site, they watch the video, they like it, they also see what their friends have been doing. So instantly they'll click on a link and they're a sticky user. Whereas if you didn't have these plugins, they would land, they would see no social context, they would really have no idea what your website's about beyond that funny video, and they would probably bounce immediately. So I think it's that creating that virtuous cycle.
Yeah, and knowing that someone is consuming the same content as you, which is the same effect as like when everyone sat around and watched like Apollo 11, was it? It's like, so when people are all watching the same television show and they realize that that's happening, there's, people feel like they can, there's something to either talk about not only at that moment, which they can now, but have that water cooler conversation the next day. With content on like the Wall Street Journal, it does make it stickier when you know that someone that you also know and respect is reading that same piece of content and you could talk to them about it later.
Okay. And one thing that really matters between the social plugins and then the other two, OAuth thing and then using the Graph API, is that with the social plugins, it's instantly aware if you're also logged into Facebook. So that's why you just immediately see like, oh, these three friends of yours also like this story or this video or use this application. Whereas for anything else that you build, you have to first get them to log in to your site before you can start figuring things out based on what's in the Facebook graph.
What about the difference between these two tiers, 2 and 3? Like, why would you do OAuth but not Open Graph? Or what is OAuth? It used to be Facebook Connect.
I think generally, at least I view OAuth as something that gets you to the Graph API. Basically, OAuth is just a mechanism to authenticate your user or the user with your website. So basically, you can make API calls on their behalf, get their username, get their interests, really know who the user is, and also bootstrap your site's experience. So rather than having this lengthy registration form or this login form, basically they can hit one button and then you have really rich data on them. And that's where the fun part begins with the Graph API, because that's when you can pull their information, pull their friends likes, which a great example of this is actually Amazon. They launched Your Store, so as soon as you land, recommendations are made to you based off of your likes on Facebook, and they recommend products you should buy on Amazon. And it's two-step. You authenticate, and then they pull all your information via the Graph API. And really, I think that's the differentiation. They're coupled together, they're not really separate.
Well, you can just get single sign-on for your site without having your users need to remember another login and password. Yeah. I mean, that you just get just vanilla, formerly Facebook Connect.
Right.
So you'll know when you're seeing a Facebook Connect site by the fact that it has a button that says something like Facebook Connect or log in with Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
And then the Graph API. So this is the real magic. It's fairly new. I mean, what things can an application do? I list some here: search, posts, people, pages, feeds, events, groups. I got that right off of developer.facebook.com. What are examples of applications for each of those things for the Graph API? Why would I want to search people from my application or search posts and applications of the API?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak on a few, and then if others want to cover some. I think, there's a huge array of information you can get about a user now, especially since F8 we launched Like, which is basically a very structured way of looking at a user, what a user's interested in. And it's, like I said, structured data that you can base recommendations off of and all sorts of other things. Pandora is actually a good example of auto-playing music based off of your likes. Friends, of course, this is a no-brainer. You can just populate your site with what your friends are doing on the site and create social context with their profile pictures, names, things like that. Events, I think a good example of event is Plancast, where you connect with Plancast and then they'll pull in events that you're going to based off your Facebook profile, and then they'll publish those to everyone that's following you on Plancast. Like I said, there's a wide array. Basically, any information that is available to Facebook.com, you can also pull as a site. And I think the opportunities for that type of information it's just limitless.
But I think that's a key point, because Plancast doesn't die because people are managing events on Facebook. I mean, Plancast can thrive by providing a richer experience around information that people are using their Facebook sign-on to create.
So once somebody comes to your site and has connected using OAuth, then you can publish to their feed. Is that right? Any number of events, or is there any limitation on that?
So it depends. So if you're publishing to the newsfeed, you can do one of two things for status updates or posting general content. You can ask for an extended permission that allows you to publish on their behalf whenever you'd like. So if they click publish button and it's yours, you can publish back to Facebook, or you can pop what we call a feed form, which kind of shows a preview to the user of what's going in their newsfeed. So there's an API method, and there's also a JavaScript pop-up. And those are the two main ways. There are also, like, you can create events on their behalf, and those will show up in newsfeed. And yeah.
How much effort does it take? We mentioned implementing the social plugins is trivial. What about implementing Open Graph API? What goes into that?
So I think, I mean, generally, when I talk to a lot of partners, I think the first step I always take them through is social plugins, because they're super easy, as you detailed, super easy to add. They're one line of code. They're just an iframe, and they're super powerful. They'll get you a lot of referral traffic and a lot of stickiness out of your users automatically. So, I think the cost-benefit analysis is like a clear yes, you should do this, and you should do it now. OAuth is, like I said, I think just one step you have to take to get to Graph API and get to the really, really interesting stuff that can be tightly integrated in your site, like Amazon's Your Store or Spotify's, pulling in your friends and seeing what they're interested in, what they're listening to. So generally, I think it's a three-step process. I think OAuth it's much easier than our last authentication functionality. It's very straightforward. I think Graph API is more difficult, both from kind of a brainstorming, how am I going to use this data? You have to put a lot of effort behind it to make sure the user experience is interesting. And then from a technical aspect, you need to know how to do things in PHP or server-side languages or JavaScript, and be able to basically hit our API and get information back. So, if you're a reasonable programmer, it's straightforward, but if you've never done programming, it's much more difficult.
Well, there's give and take with the OAuth too, because I mean, you don't get to capture. It's like it's not often an either-or scenario with people, because they don't want to necessarily give up all their registration data to be in the hands of Facebook. So oftentimes, if that is the only sign-on, there is subsequent information that's asked after the fact. Like, so they want like your address or birthday or birthday, gender, all these kinds of things that, some of that could be gleaned from Facebook. But there's, if you want to own that data as submitted to you by the user, then you can ask for it and get it. Or, there are a lot of places that just provide OAuth as an option to unlock enhanced features that are in addition to the proper site reg.
Okay, let's take some more questions.
Sorry, I want to clarify just one point. I
go
think one big announcement we made at F8 was that we got rid of 24-hour data caching, and actually you can store data indefinitely now. So if you prompt the user to register using Facebook platform, so you ask for their extended permissions like birthday, you can actually store that information indefinitely.
Right.
The only caveat is, like the rest of the internet, if the user asks you to delete it, then we require you to delete it, but that's the only thing. Otherwise, the user is yours.
Okay, Lee.
Sure. So, developing some sites that actually use the new graph API and auth, I've noticed that in talking to users, a lot of users just have a great deal of reluctance to use Facebook as the login for another site, whether it's out of fear that their information on Facebook is going to get out, or whatnot, or just a general not mistrust of Facebook. I'm wondering if there's any plans or what your guys' reaction to that is, because I think this Graph API could be a really great resource if users were more apt to accept it as a login to a site. So I wanted to see what your thoughts.
So web application owners being reticent to use Facebook Connect.
Yeah, the users being reticent to log in with Facebook Connect. Not
Okay.
the application. I would love to use it.
Okay, users. I mean, it's possible that some people aren't actually on Facebook yet. I mean, they're few and far between. But my brother, for example, is not. I don't know. Do you have any insights as to how you can get users to be more comfortable?
I'm kind of curious around like the context. Are you seeing like low numbers of users?
It's hard to tell because we set it up as our only login to the site, but it's more when I talk to people and show them the site and say this site uses Facebook as a login, they're like, no, I won't log into that site. A lot of people just will come right out and say that they will not log into a site that uses Facebook. Whereas when we have just like a password or maybe Twitter or something, like I just don't get that visceral initial reaction. But it's hard to tell because we haven't done a comparative test with like a Facebook login and a Twitter login and a password login all on the same site.
People reticent to use Facebook, but happy to use Twitter to log in. Why is that?
I think.
What I think you're talking about is like the social business dichotomy. Like Facebook's a social app. I don't want to use it for a site where I'm going to do something serious business-like. Right?
Yeah, that's a big. We get a lot of feedback like that. I think I think people are comfortable with it for like a game or something. If you're trying to do anything that's more that's not a game or more serious, then I think you tend to get that reaction.
Or something that you don't want to publish.
Or something that you're afraid that your data from your party pictures is going to get out to some other site.
I mean, I think generally I would disagree. I think it might be just a wrong perception because if you look at, for example, a startup like Simply Hired, they're actually basically a Monster.com style job searching site, and they use Facebook extremely heavily on their site. Another example is Amazon.com. They're using it for e-commerce as like a major portion of their site. Another obvious example is New York Times, which just launched the other day, which is very serious content. So I think it's just a perception issue by developers, perhaps. But I mean, I'm definitely not hearing that from partners I'm working with. Generally, I'm hearing that they're actually seeing more login and registration than they were with their normal login and registration system. So, yeah, I'm happy to talk after. If you
Okay,
want.
in the green in the back there.
Why does Facebook only open part of their APIs to the big players? Like recently, the Places API is only read-only, except for if you're like Foursquare or Koala.
Particular APIs, the Places API is not open to everyone right now.
Same thing with like credits, right? You can't use credits either.
And credits, these are some fairly new things on Facebook.
Yeah. So in terms of those, basically we move very quickly. We create functionality very quickly. And generally, when we release any product, we release it in a very small portion to users and developers. And the thought behind that is not to gate it from, like strike deals with the most important companies in the industry. It's basically to work closely with very savvy developers and developers that make sense. So, for example, Places, we worked with, Gowalla, Foursquare, Booyah, Yelp, the biggest players in the check-in space. And basically, they're helping us. They're iterating very quickly. They're helping us give feedback on our APIs, make sure things scale. And generally, our goal for everything, and it will always be our goal, is to open this to the public. So by no means are these always going to be private. They're going to be private while we're testing them because we want to make sure when we launch, they actually work for you. And that's the same with credits. So we work with, it's a closed beta, and we're actually aggressively opening it up to other developers. And we intentionally worked with the biggest players like Zynga, Playdom, because we want to make sure the stuff scales. But eventually it'll be open to everyone.
Can you give like a 2-sentence description of what credits are and what places are for those of you?
Yeah. So credits and places are relatively new. Credits essentially is the microtransaction platform on Facebook Canvas and games. So we saw an issue. Sorry, 2 sentences. Places was launched recently. It basically allows users to check into locations, and developers can use that in various ways.
Like Foursquare, or Facebook's version of Foursquare, one might say.
Kind of, but not really. I mean, we use the check-in mechanism, but Foursquare is really the company that builds everything on top of that. So things like the gaming elements they have, which is their core business. They build that. We don't touch it.
Okay, great. More questions? Right here.
You say that when we, I'm developing an application using Graph API right now. You say when we use Facebook Connect to get onto someone's profile, we have a lot of access to their likes and everything. How accessible is that data? Do we need to request any extended permissions at all, or do they have the ability to block it out in the privacy settings, or is it pretty straightforward to get to their, any kind of businesses?
What do you have access to, through the Graph API? Is there any additional permissions required to access everybody's likes?
So likes specific.
Their likes and interests.
Yeah, so it varies depending on what data you're getting, but likes and interests depend if they have changed their privacy settings. So if they haven't, if they haven't locked them down and set them to private, then you can pull them. Otherwise, you have to explicitly ask an extended permission.
Otherwise, does it act as if you're a public user, or?
Let's not do follow-up questions. So you got one shot at it because we're kind of running low on time here. I wanted to touch on one aspect that is somewhat unrelated, but I know Dennis showed me Facebook's ad API, or their ad interface for how you purchase an ad on Facebook and how it's different than, say, buying an ad on Google. Unfortunately, I can't show it online. My network's not working. But what kinds of things would you see if you were buying an ad on Facebook, and how is that just fundamentally different than buying an ad elsewhere?
Okay, so for those of you who've advertised in Google AdWords, Facebook's completely different because you're not advertising when someone has typed something into a box. It's not driven by someone searching. You're targeting based on who they are, which is indirect, because their interest can be a proxy for the fact that they want a mortgage, can be a proxy for why they might buy your product. So you have to think laterally when you're doing Facebook advertising. What are the kinds of TV shows, songs, mixes of demographics, if they're married, where they live, all those various interest targets of who they are, not what they like, not what they searched. How do those map to something that you can say? And then your ad message has to tie directly to that. The most important element in the ad is the image itself. It's Facebook, so you should probably use faces. Usually pretty female faces tend to get a higher CTR, depending on the demo, even for older males.
Strange.
Right?
That works in so many different ways. Dean, you got a question?
Yeah.
Why can't you cut and paste when you're buying ads for particular likes and stuff like that?
Why can't you cut and paste?
Yeah, like when you're buying an ad, you've got to go through and say, I want to talk to everybody that's following this football team, so and so and so on. And if you're setting up a new ad, you can't cut and paste all of those out and put it in a new ad.
Duplicate ads, you mean? You can create a similar ad. It's a third option on the bottom right.
When it's in the same campaign, but if you're going to do another campaign, it's got to be different.
Well, I didn't hear that. Sorry.
If you're in a different campaign, you don't have access to similar ads?
Oh, you can migrate campaigns. There's a weird option to do it. You can also share access between different users. That just came out a week ago.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just like websites outside of Facebook's ecosystem access users' profiles, does Facebook access every URL that someone has connected with through Facebook, and do you use those websites to further build their profile, and can ads also use that information? information to target their consumers.
I'm not sure I fully understood the question. Do you want to repeat it, or?
Yeah. I think the question is basically, does Facebook, for every URL that is an object in our system, does Facebook hit that page and like grab its content, essentially?
No, like I do a lot of market research, so I think I've connected, did Facebook connect with like, I don't know, 70 sites. So these are all URLs that I'm interested in for some reason.
Yeah.
Oh, I can use off.
So are you
off
guys
Facebook
storing that
to power
information
Facebook.
and further building my interests?
I'm gonna let Dennis handle this. I barely ever deal with ads.
Yeah, I mean, as far as ads
Okay.
on the platform, there's two ways on the platform. I mean, I guess there's Facebook ads and there's the engagement ads. I mean, as far as I know, the only information that you can use to target the delivery of ads on Facebook is using information that's created and shared on Facebook.
Okay, so we'll take 2 more questions. Jennifer?
I actually don't know Facebook very well, but if you're a brand, you have a brand, and so you have a company, but you want it separate from you because you're not your brand, can you sign up for Facebook as a brand? Like for instance, like the New York Times, does it have to do with Arthur Schlesinger or who the owner is?
You create a business account for advertising that's private.
It's
Yeah,
called
but
the
you-
Facebook page.
That's for advertising, and or you can be an administrator. You can create a page that a user, and you can assign administrators to that page as well.
Okay, last question, Stephen?
Yeah, are privacy settings preserved through the Open Graph API?
Are privacy settings preserved through the Open Graph API? Very succinct question. I really
Yes.
like that.
Yes?
Yes is the answer. Even more succinct answer. Okay. Well, if you want to catch these guys and ask them more follow-up questions, as I'm sure you do, you're going to find them across the street at Heartland Brewery immediately following this panel. They're generally really inaccessible right here, so probably don't even bother rushing up to the stage. Thanks very much, Greg, Matt, Ian, and Dennis.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Thank you.